Again from Reconstructing History, and today I want to talk to you about vintage reproduction patterns. What are vintage reproduction patterns? Well, let me tell you. Vintage reproduction patterns are when a pattern company, a modern pattern company like Reconstructing History, takes patterns that are off copyright. The copyright is no longer enforced because the patterns are so old that they're out of copyright, and we reproduce them for you to be able to use. This way, you don't have to buy an antique pattern and then destroy it as you're using it, because patterns are very fragile. They're printed on very light tissue paper, and sometimes just the act of unfolding them makes them start to disintegrate. So rather than do that, preserve the antique patterns, put them in acid-free paper and keep them in a drawer, and we reproduce the patterns on modern 20-pound bond paper, just regular letter paper, and they're nice and hefty. They're strong, you can spill your drink on them, you can wipe it off, they're fine. You don't have to worry about destroying something that's 80 or 90 years old. So that's terrific. But why would you buy a Reconstructing History vintage reproduction patterns when there are all these other companies out there doing it? Well, I'm going to tell you why. Number one, vintage reproduction patterns generally produce the pattern in the size of the original pattern. That's usually a single size. In the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, people bought the size they were. And so patterns were made in one size. Modernly, we're used to going to a fabric store and buying a pattern, and it's in a number of different sizes because that's what pattern companies do today. But they didn't do that back then. So these other companies that are doing vintage reproduction patterns, they produce it in that size. So you pick up the pattern and you say, oh, this pattern is for size 14. Well, I'm a size 16, but you know what? I'm good enough seamstress, I can grade it up one size while I'm cutting the pattern. It's no big deal. But here's the problem. You're a size 16 now. You're not that size 16 from the 20s. In the 20s, 16 was half of the bust measurement that the size would cover. So a size 14 had a 28-inch bust, and a size 16 had a 32-inch bust. And if you're a size 16 today, I'm pretty sure you don't have a 32-inch bust, because that's not what a size 16 means. So, and then there's also the confusion. There is a different set of sizes for stores. If you're a size 16 in ready-made wear, ready-to-wear clothing in a store, you're not a size 16 in pattern sizes. You're actually a larger size, because pattern companies numbered their sizes one way and stores numbered them another way. And actually, they used to be the same, but then stores decided they were going to drop all their sizes so that their customers felt that they were skinnier, which is ridiculous. So, but that's what they did. So if you're a size 16 dress in a store, you know, you pull your label out of the dress you're wearing right now and it says size 16, you're definitely not a modern pattern size 16. You're probably something more like a 22. And you're definitely not a size 16 in a vintage pattern, because those were based on your bust size, and your bust size is much bigger than 32 inches if you're a modern dress size 16. So that's very confusing. What do? Not only do we not number our sizes, we give you letters, because if you have a number, you're going to get confused with dress sizes and pattern sizes and other pattern companies' numbers. Numbers are confusing, so we letter our sizes. So we have letters A through K, and those represent certain sizes. So what you do is you get your Reconstructing History pattern, and you look on the back here under sizing, and you look up your bust size and your hip size. This is a 20s pattern, which means it has no waist size because the waist was not smaller. So you look up your bust size and your hip size, and then you find out what letter corresponds to the size you are. And you can make any size from bust size 28 to bust size 48 with one pattern, which means not only can you make it for yourself, but you can make it for every friend you have, because all of those sizes are included. You don't have to buy multiple patterns, and you don't have to go along grading patterns for yourself. Look, I grade patterns for a living. Let me do it. This is my job. I do it for you. You don't have to do it. So that's one reason. We have 11 different sizes. We don't sell you one size. We sell you 11 in one package. So you got everything you need. Number 2, instructions. Now, I hate to write instructions. I really do. It's my least favorite part of the job. But I write them because my customers need instructions to be able to put together the pattern. Let me tell you some of the instructions that are on period patterns. I'm going to read something to you. Front and back. Turn side edges of front under 1 1/4 inches, lap over side fronts the width of hem, stitch together 1 inch from crease edge, leaving left side free, and finish for closing. Gather upper edge of side fronts between double large perforations. Close shoulder and underarm seams. Turn lower edge under 1 inch, stitch to form a casing, and insert elastic. That's it. That's all of the instructions on this pattern. They give you a paragraph on the front cover of the pattern. And some of it, you see, I was hesitating as I was reading. It's not because I don't read well. It's because there are actually holes in the pattern where those words are. I have to guess what they are. So it's horrible type. It's not meant to endure. It's on that newsprint kind of paper. It's 80 years old, 90 years old. And they give you instructions that big. No illustrations, no how-to, no help with cutting, just a paragraph of instructions. Do you need more to put a pattern together? I need more to put a pattern together, and I put patterns together for a living. So I did something for you. Oh, and that's not just one company. You need to think, oh, that's that company. It's not all the companies. This is another company, and this one's in French. I'm not going to read it to you in French because my French is horrible. But those are the instructions right there. That's on the back of the pattern. They give you a pattern layout so you know how to lay the stuff out on your fabric. And they give you those instructions. And the other thing is, the yardages they give you are for 36-inch and 39-inch wide fabric. Have you ever seen 36 and 39-inch wide fabric in a fabric store? I haven't. I've seen 44, 45, 54, 58, 60, sometimes even 72. I have never seen 36 and 39 as long as I live, and I'm old. So they're giving you yardages that are for width of goods that we don't have. Now, you could buy that many yards, but it's going to be way too much if you have 60-inch goods and you're buying yardages based on 36-inch goods. And maybe you want to do the math. I don't know about you, but I don't want to do math when I don't have to. So, but I did the math. I did the math for you. So on the back of Reconstructing History, Vintage Reproduction Pattern, you will see yardages listed. And those yardages are listed for modern goods widths. So you'll see, here I have one, that the yardage requirements are 2 yards for 40-inch wide and 1.5 yards for 54-inch wide, because you can get silk in those yardages, in those yardage widths. So I've converted everything, and especially when we're working with French and German patterns, which some of our patterns do come from France and Germany. They're in meters, and most of my pattern customers are Americans, and we don't speak meters. And meters are close to yards, but they're not quite yards, and it's all very confusing. I did the math. I did the math for you. So I did you 11 different sizes that'll fit you because they're modern sizes. I lettered the sizes. I gave you yardages that correspond to the fabric that you're going to get in a modern fabric store that you can walk in this afternoon. Oh, and I was talking about instructions. So that's the instructions you get with a vintage pattern. Most vintage pattern reproduction companies photocopy the pattern, and then they just give you those instructions. Some of them will actually retype the instructions, but they still only give you a paragraph. And they sure don't do illustrations step by step so that you have a guide. They give you what the original pattern gave you, and that's it. Reconstructing History doesn't do that. Now, I know if you know me, I hate writing instructions, but it's my job to write instructions, so I wrote these instructions for you. This is one of our vintage patterns. This is 8 pages of historical notes and instructions. So I give you layouts for multiple fabric widths. I give you information on sizing, illustrations of how to put the pattern together step by step, more step-by-step illustrations, illustrations and finishing, and then period hand stitches, because in the 1920s, 30s, and 40s, sewing machines were widely used. Yes, absolutely they were widely used, but sewing machines only did a straight stitch. Sewing machines didn't do a zigzag until the middle of the 1950s, and there was no home version of a serging machine until 1965. So all of that stuff that we do nowadays to finish our clothing, they didn't do. They did it all by hand. So if you want to do what they did, I give you the stitches and the instructions for the stitches, because I don't assume that you know how to do hand stitches. You may not. You're a machine girl. I give you all that. So I give you the sizes, all of the sizes. I give you lettered sizes. I give you yardages in modern yardage widths, and I give you more complete instructions. Then what do? I give you historical notes, which no other pattern company does. I not only tell you about this particular style, I tell you how this style evolved, what came before it, what came after it, and more importantly, what you wear with it. So when you buy a Reconstructing History pattern, you're really getting the whole package. You're not just getting a photocopy of an old pattern. You're not just getting a pattern on new paper that you can use over and over again. You're getting an expanded pattern in 11 sizes with modern instructions, modern yardages, and you're getting a how-to-wear guide as well. Because really, that's what I'd want out of a pattern. So that's what I made my patterns into. I hope you'll buy a Reconstructing History vintage pattern. You see up there where it says historical patterns? Click on that. Click down a couple. It says vintage patterns. You can have one right now. So why don't you go get one? Thanks for listening. I'll talk to you soon. Bye.